Let's go. Opportunity to talk to Will Butler. Really wish this conversation happened a long time ago. For myself personally, selfishly, I wish this conversation happened a long time ago. Will breaks down, lowers my anxiety and your anxiety around some of your personal finances. And he does it with a tool that is near and dear to my heart, which is metaphor, analogy. He tells stories. He combines the offensive unit, the 11 guys on the field on a football team. He uses that and parallels it with understanding your finances. What? Could this actually be informative and entertaining? Yes, it can, my friends. Yes, it can. Will Butler is just an outstanding guy. Know him as the financial physio. Has this conversation with us. When you're done with this episode today, you'll have a really great grasp of the things on the field, the people on your team, you'll see where this is going, that you should be paying attention to. He does it in such a great and clear way that even someone like me could follow along and understand, which has to say something. So I'm pumped for you to listen to this episode. You're going to dig it. Thanks to our friends from MW Therapy. That's an EMR that is customizable, delivers modern all-in-one outpatient EMR with built-in patient portal. Everybody's got to have that now. The patients are looking for it. Marketing automations, automate that stuff. And the billing features you want at a great value. Take a test drive now at mwtherapy.com. Talking about test drives, where the heck is your career taking you? Where are you going? Do you want to go somewhere? You can. Our friends at Jackson Therapy Partners providing awesome adventures in patient care for physical therapists who care about where they're going. Visit them online if you're thinking about travel physical therapy at jacksontherapy.com. And finally, our friends at CBDRXforyou.com. That's your CBD store. Get the ABCs of CBD at CBDRX, the number 4, the letter U.com. Without further ado, let's kick off this episode. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I am ready to go.
Let's go. I feel like the amped up music is like bringing my adrenaline levels up, and I'm like, and here we go. We've got if you're watching a live stream, if you're watching the video, we have the headsets on. We're going to bring out a telestrator. This is Monday Night Football, but PT Pintcast style with Will Butler. Will, thanks for coming to the show.
Hey, I appreciate the invite.
You will know Will as the financial physio. Is that how do you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Will. That's kind of how I introduce myself. But I was talking Andrew Tran.
Yeah.
One day affixed that moniker to me.
He created that?
Yep. So
I'm sort of with him. And I'm not saying you walk around and introduce yourself as I'm the financial physio. But when someone says, like, what do you do? Did we ever talk XYZ statements before? I know I've talked about it on the show, but did you and I ever talk XYZ statements?
I'm sure that either we have or I've heard it in the past.
So this was someone else's. I stole this. And the XYZ statement is a formula, which I love because it's like, okay, let me just put whatever I want to into this formula and see what comes out. And the formula goes like this. We do X so that Y can do Z. Or we do X so that Y can become Z. And I'll give you an example from what we use for the podcast. And I used to say, like, the podcast of your profession or your profession on tap and all that stuff like that. And then I put it through this XYZ formula, and it actually came out really well because, and I'll deconstruct afterwards, but we're going to get to the financial physio part as well. Our XYZ statement for the podcast is: we share great physical therapy conversations so that busy PTs can feel connected to their profession. And there's a couple reasons we do that. So it's like, we do X so that Y can become Z. So we listen to our audience and we're like, what's your biggest frustration? We like ask surveys, what's your biggest frustration? And I didn't look for their answers. I looked for the emotion in the answers. I was like, what's the common thread between these 100 responses? What's the how do I boil down? How do I reduce these fractions to what's the emotional response? And we found that people were like, dude, I'm just like, since graduating, like, I feel like kind of alone and isolated. And like, I know I felt like in school, drinking from a fire hose was that analogy that gets thrown around a lot. And now I'm like, I don't know where to go for stuff. And I don't have any time because now I have a freaking job. And so we heard overwhelmed or lost or disconnected and wanting connection. So there's a reason we actually speak their fear, and then we tell them that we actually allay their fear. We reduce their fear. So we share great physical therapy conversations, and notice that I don't say podcast. Podcast is how I do what I do. This was hard for me. I was used to being like, we're a podcast. It's like, but what do you do? Podcasting is how I do it. So it's like, oh, we share great physical therapy conversations. And even now, as I say this, is that too vague? I don't know. I might be able to reduce that, right? And then
no, I think it's good.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So that busy PTs. So we touch on that emotional nerve of like, yeah, I do. You see me. I feel a little bit busy or overwhelmed. So they can feel connected to the profession. Because I'm like, that's kind of what we do. I'm not solving all your clinical questions. I'm just not doing that. I couldn't. I do something different. I just make you feel kind of connected. We have the kind of conversations you would have in the bar or the hallway at CSM, or what you used to talk about between classes in PT school, or what you talk about at the water cooler at the clinic. So I was like, that's connection. That's what I think our product is.
Anyway, yeah, PT water talk. Water cooler talk.
Cooler talk.
I think that's good. I think it's a good expectation. I haven't really thought of it. The difficulty that I have with that is organizing my mind around that, because my brain likes to sprint in a lot of different directions. Yeah,
it took me a year probably of being like, first I was like, this is stupid. I don't like formulas. I am the anti-formula guy. And then I was like, oh, I get it. It's like, it's clarity. So when someone says, what do you do? It's like, I connect the physical therapy profession. People go, wait, what? They're so confused by it, because normally it's like, I'm a real estate agent. Oh, okay, that's what you do. Actually, that's how you do it. What you do is you find people their dream homes every day. It's like, what? I want to talk to this guy.
Yeah, so I really like that. And then I think I've probably been resistant to things like that because of the that trope, like, I help the people who are like, I help busy, successful people live more fit. But the way that you articulated that was more personable, is direct. It was different. So I'll probably follow up with you on that.
And you see a lot of these on LinkedIn, right? Like, I'm a people connector. And it's like, that didn't say anything. I'm like, you have to keep going. It can't be a stock answer. It really needs to be from you. So I feel like without us having to go through your whole XYZ statement, which could be a completely other episode.
Yeah, I almost think we should do that.
I like it. Just in the conversations that we have, you speak two languages. I speak two languages. I speak PT and I speak communications. You speak two languages, and you speak a language that a lot of people are intimidated by, myself included, very much, where it's like, I know I should be paying more attention to my finances, but I don't know where to start. And that makes me more anxious. So I don't start, ironically, which, so who do you help on the day-to-day, just to kind of like frame the audience so they know like what you allow people to do or what you help them do?
I help clinicians and business owners, and then the overlap, business owning clinicians think about their finances in a non-threatening way.
Oof, that's a big line right there. Non-threatening.
So they can focus on what matters most to them.
I mean, I don't think I've seen someone get that close to a final XYZ statement on the first swing. It's a little wordy, but I think you have the emotions there.
Yeah, it gave me anxiety. I felt a lot of pressure doing that.
But what I mean is, like, you have a lump of clay, and all you have to do is chip now. You don't have to add to the lump. I think what you have there, because you touched an emotion that I am 100% in your target audience, because I'm like, I know I should, and I feel stupid because I haven't done it, because I don't know where to start. I know what a lot of these words are, but I don't really know how to use them. And that's the focus of the episode today. We're making it football themed. We actually started talking about this episode roughly 2.5 to 3 years ago, which shows you how fast Jimmy McKay works to getting around to talking to people. But we're going to set up finances. You've got this whole like way of making things clear and not threatening. You do it with football. There we go. I got the sound effects. All right. So do we bring up the telestrator now? Does this need a setup? I'm going to sit back. This is your offense here.
I think maybe what we do is frame the conversation, right? I think anything and everything, whether it's primary literature or a discussion of life scenarios or working with another professional, whatever it is, always providing context, I think, is important. And so I think expectations are important first and foremost. This is not going to solve everybody's problems, what we're going through. If people don't know me, they need to know very quickly that I like talking in metaphor and analogy.
Those are fun.
Because I just think that way. That's like how things work in my brain. And I've found communicating with people all over the country, whether they're making more money than they know what to do with, or whether they're not making enough, I've found that being able to communicate through analogy and metaphor kind of helps draw out and keep people focused on the most important things. Very quickly in my transition from the clinic into financial services, I needed to try to make sense of what I was learning. And initially I tied it all directly into like muscles and action potentials. And all. I was like, this is not communicable. But then what I started to notice is repetition. I started to draw this correlation and this comparison to almost a football positions chart. And I was like, oh. And so with that, and then communicating that to advisors all over the country, and then clinicians in business, like it just seems those who are unfamiliar with basic financial terms, and let's call them modalities for those who are clinical financial modalities, to like put together their financial plan of care, because familiarity with language has a lot to do, is a tremendous barrier to action.
100%. Yes.
So that's what this is. This is after delivering this analogy enough times, I finally, kind of put it on paper, and I've found that like it gives people some ahas.
So we're gonna go through like a position chart.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna kind of talk about the basics in financial planning, and this is going to be geared towards personal finances, not so much business finances, not taxes. This is not like specific advice. This is just a way to kind of think about and organize the role that these different things play in your financial lives.
I feel like role is important. I know where a tight end stands, but like, what's their role on the field? And then, okay, how do we, because you need context. This whole thing needs to be set up context. All right, let me do this real quick. Love this sound effect thing. All right. First round brought to you by our friends at Owens Recovery Science, a single source for PTs looking for certification in personalized blood flow restriction rehabilitation training and the equipment you need to apply it properly in clinical practice. Find them online at owensrecoveryscience.com. That's it. Okay. Thank you to Johnny Owens and guys for supporting the show. I am drinking a Newberg Brewing Company at noon on a Thursday, because why not? Out of my fancy new DPT, Doctor of Physical Therapy tumbler, which we sell on the PT Podcast store website thing that we send to people, which the reason I built that was Andrew Tran, full circle. He was like, why are you not selling cool stuff and drop shipping them to people? I'm like, Andrew, I see people selling t-shirts. I don't know how. And he was like, you could do it in 15 minutes. And I was like, challenge accepted. And he was right. I did it in 15 minutes. I was like, oh, I'm making stuff now.
Wow. That makes me, he's a good friend and a client. Makes me want to talk to him and
like,
figure out some of those things.
Minutes. He was like, here's what you do. And he sort of just explained it in terms that were easy to understand. It was a great episode. Maybe we'll re-release that. But like, why are you not capitalizing on this? I got a buddy who has a clinic up the street, and people always like, when can I get a t-shirt? Or when can I get a sweatshirt? Because they want to rep his brand.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I got to go order, then I'll be in, but then I don't want to have to order. That's what a dropship store is. You print on demand. They order one. Someone in Kansas makes one and mails it to that person who wants it. And he goes, great. And then you collect the money.
Man, if Andrew wasn't weathering the storm in Florida.
Oh, is he?
I'd ping him right now and be like, hey, we're talking about you.
Jump on the cast. All right. So do we need to bring up the telestrator now?
Yeah, I would do that. I'd say we probably jump right in, because I'm starting to ramble.
For the audience who's listening podcast only, they could probably follow along. But just so you know, there is a video component of what we're talking about. You can find it on YouTube and watch along simultaneously. I'll put the link to the YouTube channel in the show notes. All right. So it's on the screen right now.
All right. Here we go, Jimmy. I'm going to use you as the quarterback in this scenario. Okay. And hopefully I describe it well enough that people can visualize it. So what we're looking at right now is a play chart, is an offensive play chart. Well, we're looking at it from the perspective of the offense. And the important thing to remember, anytime you're interacting with a professional, a lot of times when you go and interact with a professional, if it's an unfamiliar subject matter, a lot of times we give away autonomy and we want these people to make decisions for us. I think it's important to remember that any professionals we're working with actually are serving as coaches, and they're not on the field. I think it's important to remember that, because there are people who you go to provide perspective when you're down there playing the game. They're not the ones playing the game for you.
Right.
It's just important.
So you're saying financial professionals, look at them more as a coach, but you're the one who's actually running the play.
Yeah, and I would say legal professionals, accounting professionals, financial professionals, anything, mentors, let's say professional mentors. Like, we sometimes give them more power to make decisions for you because we're afraid to make the decisions for ourselves. But with time, that barrier comes down. But just remember that.
Here's a great quote that I stole from one of my favorite Peloton instructors. I make suggestions, you make decisions.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So in this situation, Jimmy, you're the quarterback. The reason that you're the quarterback, you're the one running the offense. Well, in this situation, you're actually a player owner, which for any of us who ever played Madden, that's kind of like the dream, right? But in this situation, you're the player owner and you're trying to build your team so that you can be competitive in the league. What league? Whatever league you're defining it as. That's where I think people need to be somewhat introspective and have an idea of what am I trying to accomplish in life, because that's going to orient the type of team that you're working on. In any scenario, you are the quarterback. The play starts with you. The play ends with you. Everything ends up falling on your shoulders. So you surround yourself with players to kind of increase the likelihood of you having success in your given league. So on this play chart, the ball starts underneath the center, right? The big old center. And in this term and in financial services speak, I think of this as an emergency fund. This is your emergency fund. And kind of the rule of thumb here, if you're like, well, how much is enough? Like, there are all kinds of mathematical formulas, and just like rehab, we can make this as complicated as we want, but sometimes simplicity allows us to move to the next step quicker. So this is where the advice and the adage of 3 to 6 months of your expenses, of your income, however you define it. The point is, the solution that you need is, I'm not able to work for 3 months to 6 months, or something happens. What do I need cash on hand? Your emergency fund. So that's your center. So now you've got one player position filled, and we can kind of check that. Maybe I'll remember to erase so I can keep this clean, because this, just like a play chart, gets kind of messy. So there we go. It gets real busy. So there we have our center taken care of. Let's move to the guards, the people who support the center and helping you create kind of your barrier as the quarterback from whatever life is going to throw at you in a defensive way. This left guard, I think of as health insurance related, right? The purpose of any insurance is to transfer the risk or the responsibility of covering something that you can't afford to cover. Like, a quarterback can't throw the ball and fend off the outside linebacker. Let's get a separate player to do that. So with health insurance, you generally have 3 ways of handling it. You can go to the marketplace if your employer's not providing it, but employer provided. You have health share plans, and some people elect to use private insurance. Regardless, you need to have an answer to that position. What and how much is funded totally depends on your situation. But anyway, it's that position chart, left guard, right? Then let's go over to the right guard. I kind of lump in 2 common insurances here. I think this is where I was running out of players. But for your right guard, let's think of it as this. If you own a home, it's your homeowner's insurance. All of us or most of us will have cars. If you don't, fine. Or this could also be renter's insurances. This is basically large, substantial property that you can't afford the cost on if you needed to replace it. I just dropped my pencil, so let me grab that really quick.
So it looks like the left guard is more like human, and the right guard is more property, like you just said. Those are the kinds of insurances that
great way to think about it. And those are the types of things where having at least a baseline amount, I think, is important. My lesson and difficult lesson, and this is probably why I combine them. One time I had a car stolen. I went in to get a hamburger, came outside, and my car was gone. I was like, interesting. So I called up my car insurance company and I said, hey, my car was stolen. And I had about $3,000 worth of stuff inside of it. And I go through it, I'm talking, and they say, well, just so you know, we insure the physical vehicle, not this. We have a limit, but we are not obligated to insure what's inside of the vehicle because that's personal possession that's not related to the physical automobile. So that was one of those things where I learned, and if I had bundled at the time, I was in my early 20s. So if I had renter's insurance, that would cover the lost property. Yeah. So that's probably why I combined them in that position. So appreciate you, Jimmy, and help me bring into focus that. But regardless, what you can see starting to form is you're starting to see you're building your offensive line. Is it sufficient? No, but could you do something with it? Sure. More so in backyard football, pickup football, flag football. I think if you got 3 big buddies, you could run a flying V, maybe pick up a few yards, right? But at some point, something's going to break through. So let's talk about what I start to think of and classify as financial insurances. So the 2 big events, I think of them almost as GoFundMe items. One of them is death, and the other one is disability. And there's a reason why I have them oriented on the right and left, and I'll get into that here in a second. But over here, what we'll do is I'm actually going to lump the right tackle and the tight end together. And there's a reason for that. It's not because I'm an idiot and I understand that they're 2 different positions, but because there are different kinds of life insurances, because this is death. So first and foremost, this is life insurance, and it is an insurance. And it's also important to know that as you start to grow and you develop, you might end up in situations where you might be here. There's all kinds of different financial strategies, like we talked about before. Some of them leverage certain kinds of insurances to become more of an asset. Think of these, we would call these permanent life insurances, but most commonly and for most people, they would use something called term life insurance. Regardless, that's the reason why I lumped them together, because you might be in a situation where you have a player combination of both. But regardless, let's just check that box. Now, when you're looking at life insurances, do I need life insurance? Well, based upon financial media, a lot of times it sounds like they say everybody needs them. Now, I will say that I do have a leaning bias towards life insurance, but that has more to do with my father passing away unexpectedly as he was starting a business and putting my family in just a very difficult situation. And the hedge for that, the play for that, would have been a life insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, having something is better than nothing, especially if there are people that depend on you. So if you have a property and people would stay in that property if you weren't here, if you have a business and that business is supposed to continue on, those different types of things. So it's a great area to start asking questions on, but I'm kind of diluting the play calling and the positioning. So I'm going to just keep moving forward. But just know that that right tackle and that tight end comprise and provide the solution for, one life strat. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Death. That's what you're saying. So, right.
Exactly
Okay,
right. So, and now you can see this. So then on the left side, do you remember the movie The Blind Side?
I do. Yeah. Michael Orr, right?
Michael Orr, and who I'm actually thinking about is Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock. Yep.
She was amazing in that movie. Always is amazing.
Sandra.
But the whole purpose of that position, you tell me, Jimmy, what was significant about him being the left tackle, and why did they call it the blind side?
So as a lefty, I am akin to most quarterbacks being right-handed, most of the population being right-handed. So your back would be turned to the blind side. You get hit when you're not ready for it. That's going to be more debilitating.
Exactly right. And it's that hit that we don't see, especially I find when I work with healthcare providers, it's the hit we don't see that can be the greatest threat to our productive future. And so I think of that left tackle as the blind side, and I think of that as disability. And so the solutions here for that would be, these are our disability insurances. There's effectively two branches of short-term disability. There's short-term disability and there's long-term disability. Short-term disability can go into effect depending on how the plan is defined, but in a super majority of the time, it's an employer-provided benefit because it's often written on groups. It's rarely written on individuals. That landscape is slowly changing because people are moving away from traditional employment. But think of short-term disability as solving for injury or illness, preventing you to produce an income, generally lasting, the time period is less than 90 days.
Got it.
Sometimes, especially like hospital-based employers will have short-term disability that pushes out 6 months. In general, though, it's 90 days or less, which I typically remember because it goes back to the purpose of our emergency fund, is to help in that sort of short-term period. And when you push into 6 months, it helps kind of fill that gap.
Sure.
And anyway, so that's short-term disability. The more substantial one, because I believe that it's all within the capacity, especially of the people listening here, to save enough money to pay for 3 to 6 months of life stuff. It could be very draining and very stressful, but it's not necessarily life-altering over the long term. Whereas disabilities that last longer than 90 days have a greater likelihood of being indefinite. And who knows how long that lasts? Does it last 6 months? Does it last 9 months? Does it last 2 years? Does it persist for 20 years? That is a much more difficult situation to solve for. And so I think of this more strongly as this left tackle, I think of as long-term disability. And these can be set up to provide for 5 years or 50 years. It can go to retirement age. And typically, because it's such a significant threat, employers will a lot of times provide 50 to 60% of that benefit. And
they're going to contribute 50 to 60% of that benefit.
Correct. They'll have something called if you have any group disability policies, typically these are the ones that are lumped into it. And long-term disability, the way that they structure those contracts, usually covers about 60% of your benefit. Something to remember with relationship to a long-term disability, if your employer pays for it, when you receive that benefit, it's taxable. So it's not like a true 60%. It's just something to be mindful of. If it's coming out of your paycheck, that benefit will be tax-free. So those dollars will stretch further. Regardless, if your employer is kind of providing a little bit of that position, the question you need to ask yourself is, in my life, if I was not able to work for an extended period of time, can I make life work on 60% of what I earn? I generally find that people who are in their income earning years, their prime years, the answer is no. Especially when you factor in loans, especially if you have children, especially if they're just all these, as life gets more complicated and the need for income increases, 60% becomes insufficient very quickly. So this would be something where you might go into the marketplace or talk to somebody like me and pick up something. It would be a supplemental long-term disability policy. And what that does is, let's say, go back to that 50, 60%, you would layer on another 50 to 60%. One of the reasons why these insurances are typically sought out when you're younger, besides the fact that they provide during your income earning years, is they are also health dependent. Meaning you have to be able to qualify for these, because what you're doing is you're transferring, or you're giving the insurance company this huge financial risk, saying, hey, I need you to secure or protect, I don't know, what am I going to make in my career? $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million? Well, granted, the odds are slim that that happens to you, but it's tragic consequence. So you're pushing that liability to the company. So they want to make sure they're making a good bet on you. So they're going to want to know, are you healthy? If so, how healthy? So they're going to have health history questionnaires. They're going to do the same thing for life insurance, but not nearly with the level of due diligence as for disability, because there's a much higher likelihood that you end up disabled in the next 20 to 40 years than you pass away.
Right.
Does that make sense? I feel like I'm on a
No.
talk track and rambling. And so that's important to consider, is protecting that income. Now, there's a lot of nuance within these different positions, and based upon feedback, I would say, from the episode, if people want to do follow-up episodes and we can dive in on different positions, great. But for today's sake, I say we just keep moving.
Okay.
The one thing that I would say and look at and consider is what we've done now is put a lot of ugly circles around your offensive line. And now look what you've done is you've created a pretty robust barrier protecting you, the quarterback, from kind of the downside and the negative circumstances of life. And so that's kind of, now you can take time and you can look around and you can make moves. You know, this is where I think maybe this is a clinician who's in a typical clinic setting. Well, now they've got a buffer and they can kind of look around and say, you know, I want to go into independent practice, or I want to become a traveling therapist, or I want to start a side business, or I want to do those things. With this kind of buffer in place, they're able to kind of look around and kind of survey the landscape.
This sort of reminds me of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like your offensive line is taking care of food, shelter, warmth, all those things. It's like, without that, how can you look downfield? You can't.
Exactly right. That's actually I'm going to use that when I talk to people who say, I don't actually understand football. I'll say, all right, well, let's compare it to Maslow. Everybody.
The line's the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, exactly right. It's the bottom of the pyramid. So then going to that, we've talked about all these insurances and we've talked about all these, unfortunate things. This is where now people can start to get a little bit more excited. And then this is where things get very individualized, as we think about how do we grow money? Because that's how you win games, is you need to have assets substantial enough to replace your month-to-month living indefinitely. Like, that's the goal of financial independence. The age at which that happens, I don't know. It depends. How you do it, I don't know. It depends. But just know that some of the most common players in these positions, I would say, if we go down here to the fullback and the running backs, we go to our running core. Think of these as qualified plans, meaning that they qualify for tax benefits. Most commonly, these are IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, and then they could also, especially in smaller or solo employment situations, maybe it's a simple IRA or something called a SEP IRA. Regardless, their function is the same. The government says, if you purposely save dollars for retirement, we're going to give you tax benefits.
Right.
The two types of the tax benefits generally lump into one of two ways. You either get a tax benefit today or the future. And so today that would be all the normal ones, the traditional IRAs, anything pre-tax, anything that comes out before it gets to your paycheck. The benefit is you don't pay tax on that money in the given year.
Right.
As that money grows, those taxes are deferred. And then when you go to access them, that's when the government starts to tax you. But either way, it's a tax benefit. The pre-tax stuff is when people start talking about Roth IRAs. And you can have a Roth IRA, you can have a Roth 401k, you can have a Roth 403b. Roth basically just defines the taxation. It's kind of like using the term eccentric or isometric, right? Like you can move into these different positions and you affix that and it tells you what you're actually doing in that motion. So with this, that's how that would be set up. Is there a right or wrong in the approach? That's when it gets very granular. What's your team's strategy?
Right.
Because if your plan is to be done and retired in 10 years, maybe utilizing these buckets maybe aren't the smartest. Maybe. It just depends. So that's what these buckets are. These are these, let's just call them retirement plans specific. And we can circle back once we get all the players labeled, but let's keep labeling players. Moving out to your receiver core, this is where you can get into different, I think kind of a standard receiver position would be something that we would call a brokerage account.
Okay.
A brokerage account is a non-retirement investment account. You don't get the tax benefits like you do with those qualified plans that we just talked about, but it's money that's accessible. It's liquid. You can go in and out of it with little penalty. The taxation might change depending on when you access it. Like if you put a bunch of money in the market and you pull it out 6 months later, that's taxed differently than if you waited a year. You know, that's the difference between capital gains tax and ordinary income tax. Regardless, you're not penalized. In general, when you reach into retirement plans prematurely, you pay a pre-tax penalty of about 10%. And now, depending on when people listen to this, just to keep this podcast evergreen, these things vary depending on tax law. But just know that with retirement accounts, premature access oftentimes results in a 10% penalty. There's exceptions to rules, but I think today we're just establishing a basic play chart,
Right.
not getting into exceptions. So in that receiver core, going back to this brokerage account, the important thing to remember that a lot of times people get hung up on, or a question that I hear a lot, is they say, well, which one gives me the best rate of return? That's not what these are for. These aren't rate of return dependent. Rate of return depends on what you put in the vehicle. Meaning you could put, let's just use Apple or Tesla. You can put, let's say 10 shares of Tesla in a brokerage account. You could put 10 shares of Tesla in your Roth IRA, and their rate of returns will largely be the same, assuming that you bought them on the same date, same time, same cost. But the value of that will depend on when and how you access it.
Got it.
So don't get fixated on rate of returns in the accounts, because that comes down to more of what we would call allocation or how you set those players up. So I think of it in a very literal sense. Like, do you want a tall player to be able to reach up over everybody? Do you want somebody who's faster? Do you want somebody who's stronger? Like, obviously, ideally, you would want all things in all categories.
Right.
But we just know that players don't always work that way. The person who's a perfect wide receiver could be a terrible tight end, and vice versa. So anyway, either way, that would be a brokerage account. The other thing to think about with wide receivers, just like we have different kinds of football offenses, this is also where I would kind of pencil in speculative investing. And I would say speculative, maybe that's cryptocurrencies, maybe that's real estate, maybe that's collectibles. I know somebody who buys and trades bourbon and whiskey.
Really?
And has had years where they've made $5,000 to $6,000. Now that all of a sudden starts to become substantial in relation to your income.
Correct.
But it's just important to know that that's kind of where those think about. Now, the pushback and challenge, because sometimes people want to know, like, what are some of the downsides? It just depends on the camp that you're trying to do things in. I have clients who all of their asset accumulation and wealth accumulation, almost all of it, is real estate centered. It doesn't mean that they don't have access to these plans, and doesn't mean they don't put real estate in that. But their primary operator of driving their wealth is in accumulating real estate, whether it's flipping it, whether it's Airbnb-ing it, whether it's renting it. There's just a lot of different ways to orient it. But regardless, I think for helping people orient themselves, your running backs are retirement counts, meaning they're dependable, rain or shine. If you're putting money into it, if you're getting an employer match, you're always going to get tax benefits. It's always going to be doing what the market does. It just keeps moving forward, if that makes sense. Whereas sometimes the speculative stuff can come in and out of favor. Regardless, what you're able to see now that we've kind of named all these positions is now you as a quarterback can determine how you want to approach your opponent life. And maybe you want to be real run heavy, maybe you want to be pass heavy, maybe you do want a balanced approach. But the point is you need to know who and what roles the players are playing on the field.
Got it.
What questions do you have? I've just
this is good. I mean, what Lombardi say about running versus passing game? He was like, three bad things can happen if you pass, right? They could drop it, somebody could intercept it, or you could fumble it. He goes, only one bad thing can really happen, if you run it, you fumble it, or you get, So yeah. I like that. It's the more reliable ground game, or the high return West Coast offensive, a wide receiver. Which one's right? Depends.
It depends. And it also depends. Are you a business owner? Are you W-2? Are you in a situation where you're dual income, or are you the primary provider and have lots of dependents? Are you receiving inheritances from this is where once you kind of understand what the basic players are and get a rough idea of what those are, then you can start calling plays and you can start developing the offense.
You don't have a wide receiver, don't call a Hail Mary. That's a crappy call.
Exactly right. And so I think this takes us back to, once you kind of understand the players, then you can start to understand how to fund those players, meaning what kind of money am I allowed to invest in these various players?
Right.
And so that's where things get more specific and more tailored. But what I think is important to know is there are different components to financial planning. Some of them are defense only, some of them are offensive and defensive, and then some of them are offensive. The problem that I see is that so much of the media is written around things that are sexy and appealing. Like I would bet most people who casually watch football can name more offensive players, wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks than they can name offensive linemen.
Right.
And we just kind of discussed that the role, and we just kind of lump them all into it. We say, what we hear a lot, at least in Southwest Ohio, is, yeah, the Bengals offensive line is really letting Joe Burrow down.
It's a group.
Yeah.
But one guy could be the sieve. He could be the hole,
Exactly right. And so financial media a lot of times will talk about the sexy sides of things, rate of return, growth. We just saw that over the last couple of years with cryptocurrencies, right? And it's not to say and to vilify any one thing over the other, but it's an understanding of the role that it plays. It's just interesting. You've probably seen in rehab media, we get so up in arms when people vilify squats or deadlifts or some of these other things. And we're like, oh, you can't say that, not all exercise. But then you just change the subject matter a little bit and we do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Roth IRAs are the end all be all golden God. Then I can find just as many articles that say that they're trash.
Right. You touch an emotion and communicate, right? Because remember, the goal of someone communicating most of the time is to get attention. That is their goal, right? Not always understanding. So that's why they'll do the clickbaity, sexy things.
Yeah, exactly right. So then when people are looking at this, and takeaways from this is when you start laying out all these positions and you use all these names, if I just went through a list and I talked to people, I said, well, tell me about your brokerage account. Tell me about your qualified plans. Well, if you just start going through the list, it's very easy to see how people get overwhelming.
Sure.
And then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind. Create some structure and some organization. Your coach should be able to tell you, the quarterback, who and what you should be worried about. If you're always fixated on, do I have enough money saved? You might spend so much time worried about this center that you forget to put money to a wide receiver so you can run it. Yeah. Right. So then once you kind of know that these positions exist, whether you're a brand new team in the league or whether you're the most experienced team in the league, better players come with time as you start to generate more cash flow and increase your income. And so that's when you're able to go back once you have a team that can play, then worry about increasing your income so you can buy better players. And it's not to say that, look at the bad news Bears or look at the underdog teams or look at that story, of the come behind. But I would much rather, when it comes to my financial future, be a predictable team, a powerhouse team. I'm struggling to figure out who that would be now because the league is out of control.
Right.
But it'd almost be like the predictability of the New England Patriots for years.
The last 15 years, yeah.
Anybody, when it comes to their retirement, would rather be predictable like the Patriots than volatile like the Cincinnati Bengals.
Right.
You know? Anyway. What questions do you have? Pick my brain.
I think this allays a little bit of overwhelmingness in that I think what you're describing there in terms of, well, we pay attention to the thing that's being talked about, and typically the things that are being talked about are not the basics, they're the big sexy things. I haven't heard it quite put like this, especially when you like if you're like me, who's somebody who works for themselves and works for someone else.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's just like, I don't know, check the boxes. HR, I talked to HR 2 times on the day I walk in and the day I walk out. Most of the time it's like, just check everything so we can get you processed. And I'm like, I don't know. I cheat. I send all my insurance stuff and my HR stuff to my cousin because she works in HR. And I'm like, Allison, like, do this, like explain this to me, like help me out. And so she does this, but if you don't have an Allison, what are you supposed to do? And that's insurance. That's only a player or two on the field. There's all these other things which can quickly become overwhelming.
Which is then where somebody like, financial coach, planner, advisor, I don't know, people label themselves so many different things. Now the other thing that I think is important to know as it relates to this financial picture, the last thing I want people to walk away with is that they absolutely end all be all have to have a coach. You can solve for that differently. It's like rehab. As much as we think that somebody has to have a physical therapist or has to, that they don't always. For a lot of times they don't. But the question is do you have the bandwidth and the ability to comprehend and the ability to suspend emotion during decision-making times to make the best decisions for yourself?
Right. I mean, what's your time worth? My neighbor is super handy, right? And we're like fixing up this house I just bought. And he was like, hey, man, like just FYI, your driveway's, a couple years old. Like the old owner probably paved this 10 years ago. He's like, you could repave it. That's a lot of money. He's like, and this isn't that bad. He's like, you could reseal it. I'm like, oh, I don't know what that means. He's like, you pour the black stuff on and you kind of mush it around with the squeegee. I go, all right, I'll go to Lowe's. And he goes, listen. Now, keep in mind, we've been putting fences in, tearing trees down, doing a lot of stuff ourselves. I say ourselves. I do it because he tells me how to do it. And he's like, I'm going to tell you this. This is something you pay someone, pay him $200, pay some high school kid. He goes, it's not complicated. He's like, it sucks though. But that kid, he needs $200. So to him, the suck is worth it. He goes, it ain't worth your time. He's like, just pay it. Buy the stuff and do it. So it's like sometimes the juice is worth a squeeze. I'm sure I could learn all this, Will, all of it.
Oh, I know you could.
But I don't want, it's time. It's going to take me longer than it would Will or someone else when I would rather be out recording an extra podcast or not sealing my driveway. So it's juice versus squeeze. It's like you use your Madden reference. Remember? I remember the first game I played where you could build your own player. It was NHL 95 for Super Nintendo. And
good. Such a good game.
You were given like an X number of points. So you could be super fast, but then if anybody touched you, you get knocked down. It was like, yeah, you could be. And then you figured out, okay, I need to be fast, but also have like strength and a little bit of stamina or else I gassed out fast. So it's like we're all given like 100 points in NHL 95 or Madden. You can't be the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, the best hands in everything. So like figure out where you want to devote your time and effort, then do that, but solve for the weaknesses. I mean, I heard someone say, and it was a great quote, if you have a problem that costs $500 to solve and you have $500, you don't have a problem. You might be choosing not to solve that problem, but that's a choice you're making. So if you have the resources, decide where you want to spend them. So
piggybacking off of that, you're absolutely right. And the other thing to remember is not every team has the same coach forever.
Correct.
In coaching. So sometimes I find that we get so fixated on finding the absolute best answer and we miss an answer.
Right.
And it's finding a viable solution to the problem. And so like I've had that. I remember when I first got into financial services, I like showed up just the same way I did with PT. I can solve everybody's problems always.
Right.
First of all, it's going to burn you out. It burnt me out. Second of all, it creates too many moments of indecision. And it's better to take action on something than to not.
Don't let
the,
perfect be the enemy of done.
yeah, exactly right. I think it's Aaron LeBauer where he has now his new campaign is
95.
he says 80% is good enough.
Right.
I think is what it is. And I think
fun.
Yeah, and the thing is it's a takeaway. Now, again, with these finances, there's plenty of resources where people who have an interest and want to, but I can also say that it does make sense to start developing relationships with professionals in these spaces because what I've known and what I've seen is that for people to get started, I don't there's a degree of it's somewhat formulaic, but what happens is over time and your life becomes dynamic and different from your peers, your situations and your solutions can become as dynamic as well.
You're playing against different teams with different abilities and different strengths, and they're better or worse.
And especially when I'm talking to people who are approaching retirement and I'm hearing what they wish they would have done differently, a lot of them are like, I wish I would have started talking to somebody sooner. Or they start saying, I had no clue that taxes were going to be this complicated when I went to access money. And if you're not an outlier who enjoys reading tax code or staying abreast of those different things, there are certain things you're not going to want to make mistakes on. And so maybe years of developing a relationship with somebody when things are more simple will allow you to develop the relationship of trust so that when things do get difficult or they wave a flag, I mean, it's like looking at the head coach when the head coach says, hey, here's what I'm seeing, or you got somebody up in the box you're able to talk to. Again, I just think that it behooves lots of people to have these conversations and develop these relationships. But I also want to make sure that people realize that they might be doing a sufficient job. But how do you know? Like, how are you getting checked on that?
Right.
I don't know.
What are typically the things that people ask you about the first time you meet? Like, what are like people sit down, they go, all right, well, I just heard that, I listened to that podcast and heard the football thing. Like, what are the emotional like purges? Because I'm sure like getting to that point, much like a physio, I knew I had a problem for a long time with my shoulder, and then I waited 6 months, then I saw the doctor, I waited 5 more months, and now I'm here. They're finally with you, and they just go blah. What do you hear from them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if they're healthcare providers, it's typically what about my debt? What's the impact is this debt going to have? Like, how limiting is my debt? I feel emotionally this way about it. And when I look at rough math, this is what I see. And then when I compare it to what my income is, what do I do? So another analogy,
a lot of people that I know do is they ignore the crap out of it and they just go. Jamie Schreier had a term, checking balance accounting. He was like, as long as there's enough money to cover whatever was just to come out for the month, the mortgage, and we're fine. It's like, are you fine? And he was like, am I fine? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly right. So I would say those are the biggest rocks that people are talking about. And I almost think of that though as like using another analogy, it's like the Titanic. When I present at schools, it's, I provide that visual, and we know from history, icebergs can be dangerous. The problem is if we spend all our time focusing on how to navigate and avoid the iceberg, we forget about the journey across the open ocean. And as scary as an iceberg is, I'd be more afraid of getting caught in an F5 hurricane.
Right.
Which is maybe a little too soon since people are going through it. But
right now, yeah.
Or running out of fuel in the middle of the ocean, or losing navigation equipment, those types of things. And so typically the biggest things that people want to know is, what about my debt? And then so that's something that we talk about and we triage, kind of go through that to kind of afford them the possibilities, especially with people who have desires to be self-employed. They're just so worried that the debt is going to impede their ability to progress. And I just don't think that that's the case if people understand their debt appropriately. Now, some people are in situations where it is substantial and it is significant and they do need to consider it. But I would say that's one of the first things. Am I going to be okay? The next things that people usually want to know about if they're employed is they say, how do I take advantage? How much money should I be putting into my 401k? It's probably the most common. And then I hate it because I give the most common PT answer. Well, it depends. There is good advice of capture the match because it's free money. But then my question is how long do you plan on staying there? And is that money vested?
Yeah, I didn't understand what that term meant until my current place. They were like 3 years vested. I was like, cool. And then like 6 months later, I'm like, what does that mean? And they were like, if you leave before 3 years, we could take that money back. And I was that.
Exactly. They get to keep in the simplified thing for people who don't know what vested is, who are listening and are too afraid to ask, or just as a reminder, what vesting means is if they're giving you a contribution, let's say you put in 6% of income and they match 3 or 6, whatever, let's just say 6 as well. So you have effectively, from a planning perspective, 12% going towards, a good ballpark number to just get started is around 20. Not everybody's doing that. Some people are doing a lot more. Some people are doing a lot less. We just need a vector. So that's not bad. That's not a bad direction. Well, if you leave, let's say in Jimmy's case, they say a 3-year vesting, and you leave in year 2, you might not get that 2 years worth of 6% that they were putting in on your behalf.
Correct.
So vesting means their right to keep what they were going to contribute. You always get to keep what you put in. You don't always get to keep what they put in.
I've never had that, but this was completely new to me.
Well, and sometimes it's a fixed and people just don't even look.
Yeah. I remember my first big job in radio. I sat down with the HR lady and she was just, just going through the checklist, and she was like, what do you want to put in your 401k? And I was like, I don't have any money. I don't know. And she's like, who cares? She's like, I'm not supposed to tell you any of this, but it says right there, we match like 10% or whatever. It was something crazy back then too. And she was like, you are dumb unless you do that. She's like, just do that and just trust me. And she goes, you're not going to, you'll notice it on your first paycheck and then you'll never notice it again. But she's like, you'll call me, I'll be dead. You'll be 60 and you'll be like, damn, she was great. And she's like, you'll thank me and I'll be long gone. And I was like, listen, lady, you sound like you know what you're doing. Do that. Like, go crazy, Doreen.
Yeah, well, exactly right. So that's it. So they want to know, what do I do about my debt? What do I do about my employer benefits? And then they start getting into, well, how long do I have to work types of questions.
Right.
Or a lot of times people are like, what about a mortgage? And so those are the types of things that they want to know.
They want to know if they could afford if they could carry a mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times a good coach will provide context and provide some baseline. And as far as working with a financial professional, at least the way that me and the people I affiliate with do, is we create a baseline. If somebody's interested in a place where, more formal financial planning makes sense, it's a lot like a PT eval or an intake. It's, you share with me some of your histories, or like what accounts do you have going on and what matter. And then you tell me the types of goals. And then we run some analytics, and then we show you the charts and the graphs and say, based upon the goals you told us, here's what you're on track for. How do you feel about that? And that's when people either go, that sucks. Or a lot of times they go,
didn't realize it was way close.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot further off.
I think football, your whole thing is completely in line. It speaks people's language. Everything depends. Like, should I be more wide receiver heavy? Why, man? Like, you're on the 30-yard line and you got 5 minutes left in the game, and all you got to do is hit a field goal. Like, why are you going to risk it? It's like, oh, that makes sense. When you put it like that is a great term. Well, when you put it like that, obviously I'm not going to pass the ball. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
But if you don't know the context, if your head's only down and you're in the huddle and you're like, what down is it? I don't know. What's the score? Don't know. Like, what are we going to run? I don't know. Just run a play. That's a dumb strategy.
Well, and then being able to have those different players allows you to add complexity. You start seeing people run some trick plays. You see some draws and traps and just different stuff. Now maybe you're pulling somebody from the right side of your line and having them run and lead block for the back. Maybe that's the receiver. Maybe you're doing reverses. You're just able to start to layer things in the more familiar you become and the more options you kind of pay attention to. And that, I think, is what really diversification relates to. A lot of people affix it directly to their investment accounts, and it can, and the principle applies there. But I think a lot of what it is having money, having meaningful money in multiple different places to allow you to make different decisions based upon tax environments, based upon global economic conditions, based upon these different things, can behoove most people. Sometimes with time, as you start to save money and accumulate assets, you'll find a strategy that is your absolute 100% predictable. This is what I'm doing. This is me. Just like we see certain teams show up and you know exactly what they're going to do year after year after year after year. And that can work. But if you don't have players on the field, the strategy doesn't matter.
You ready to do 3 questions? We do have a tradition of a show. It's called 3
Yeah,
questions.
we can do 3 questions.
Questions brought to you by our friends from Physical Therapy and Balance Centers. Find them online at physicalfranchise.com. It's FYZICAL franchise.com. On average, a private practice that joins their network grows more than 40%. It's not too bad. So find out what their network is doing to navigate and adapt to industry changes. Again, physicalfranchise.com. All right, the first question on 3 questions. Who is someone else besides Will that the audience should seek out? Like, you know, it could be someone like a writer, like someone who's a bestseller, or someone that you know. Like, who's someone? Hey, you know who else does great stuff in a different? Maybe Will's the football guy, but this person's a soccer person.
Now, can it just be comical?
Yes.
All right. Oh my gosh, I'm not pulling it really quick. Give me a split second.
I'm taking a drink. Take your time.
All right.
You're building up the suspense, though. I can't wait.
There shouldn't be this much suspense because it's not that exciting, but they're one of the most recent follows on Instagram that I've followed.
You're following them?
Yep, I am following them. And they are... This is killing me. This is embarrassing me, actually.
Wish I had dramatic music.
I know. I wish you did, too. All right, so the name of the account is Disappointing Affirmations.
Okay, and give me a good disappointing affirmation.
The fella's name is Dave. Dave's a writer, and in his little bio, he says, "All words and photos are by me. A bipolar, ADHD, mental health advocate, and he all his content is a realistic mental attitude." So, just an example. I don't know if it's gonna. This is bad. This is bad podcasting.
Lower your expectations. People will always disappoint you. I mean, have you met people? All right, yeah. I like Dave. What is it again? I got to follow that now.
Disappointing Affirmations.
I got to see. I like that. I like that sort of thing.
I think it's great.
We did a stunt at the radio station because the radio station's a really great place because your job is to be, especially at a rock radio station, your job is to do sort of stupid shit and then tell people about it.
Yeah.
So we contacted this company in January, but we didn't tell anybody what the prank was until August. And it was like a company like that Daily Affirmation, and it was like the anti-motivational poster. They sold anti-motivational posters. So we replaced all the motivational posters because our boss was our general manager was huge into them. Every room, in the bathroom, not kidding. Yeah. We replaced all of them with anti-motivational posters. We just literally just yanked it out, put it back in. 8 months, nobody noticed. And then we had the guys on. We're like, 8 months. We have been laughing in secret for 8 months. It actually motivated us because we're like, no one knows about this still. And then finally, one lady was like, "This says give up."
That's exactly right. That's so the one I just pulled up while you were telling that story. The guy says, "Don't anyone else make you feel like shit. That's your job."
Yeah. See,
and it's like. It's great. So that's my people should follow.
I was a marathon runner, triathlete. When I would go to support people, who the hell wants one more? You're doing great, son. So I would say it's we'd write funny ones, it's never too late to quit. Lucky Nichols looks good on you or something and you know what? When I read those as an athlete, I laughed, and that was what I wanted. I was you know what, dude? You're right. All right. That was your first question. What the hell is the second question? Second question. What is something the audience should take a look at if they want to take a deeper dive? Is there a book? Is there a website? Is there a newsletter, an email list that you're like, yeah, this is pretty good information on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff on YouTube. Actually does a pretty good job of it. Graham Stephan is a guy who has a really good practical, grounded channel on finances and the likes of which. He's pretty heavy real estate leaning, but does do a lot of stuff with the market. But also it's applicable because he's very transparent with himself and with things he's going through. And he interviews a lot of high performers. Mm-hmm. I would say that's a good account.
Perfect. That's all we got. Great. All right. Why should someone care about what we talked about today? Why should, and we'll frame it for this particular question. Why should people know the players on their team? Why is it super important to know the players and what their roles are on their team?
Because of all things that you replace, time is not one of those. And I know that anybody and everybody listening to this has seen the person who seems too old to be working, and they've felt bad, and they've been like, man, that's a real bummer that person has to do that. And if you don't look at your players now,
it might be you.
That might be you.
I mean, I don't want to, use fear as a motivator, but like, you've had that emotional experience, and that could be it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, by not looking at your players, a lot of time it's a huge area of anxiousness that prevents people from chasing down things that they really care about.
I'm not going to look under there. Why? Because I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's good. And I'd be honest. Somebody had a quote. It was like, if you worry about something that might happen in the future, and it does, you've lived through it twice. You worried about it, and you had that feeling, you had that visceral emotional response, and then it actually happened. You did. If you just keep paying attention to stuff and it happens, you only live through it once. It's like, that seems like a pretty good return on investment. Only living through something crappy once.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Last thing we do on the show is the parting shot. All right, parting shot brought to you by our friends from the Academy of, there we go, there's the banner, the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy. Find them online at orthopt.org. They've got their industry or profession-leading current concepts of orthopedic physical therapy. This is their resource that they continually update, the latest evidence in orthopedic physical therapy. No matter where you are in your career, where you are, it's a map. No matter where you are, they'll get you to that OCS exam, or they'll get you to be a more confident and competent orthopedic physical therapist. Find them again at orthopt.org. All right, last thing we do, parting shot, as its name indicates, whatever you want to leave with the audience with, kind of your soapbox statement, your idea that you want them to walk away with. What do you got for them?
I think there's still all this pressure, but I would say, I think the parting shot, and the thing that I think is important, is when you engage a professional, respond to the professional, even if you're uncomfortable of the feedback they might receive.
Yeah.
If too many people are avoiding difficult conversations with themselves and then with people they look to help them solve problems. And as often as we think, you talk to so many people who say, I would love it if somebody said something to me directly.
Right.
Well, too often when people are given that opportunity, they don't share that direct feedback.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you want to connect, the website is financialphysio.com, correct?
Yeah, that's a way to get on a call calendar.
Get on a call.
Why not?
You just listened to him for 60 solid minutes, and you're still here. And you're thinking, all right, this doesn't seem as scary. I bet you after you talk to Will, you might actually feel good about it. Wouldn't that be great if you feel good about it? They say the best conversations happen at happy hour. Will, appreciate you coming out to ours.
I appreciate it, Jimmy. Glad we finally did this.
Cheers.
The PT Pintcast is a product of PT Pintcast LLC. It is hosted and produced by PT Pintcast CEO Jim McKay and CBO Sky Donovan from Marymount University. We talk PT, drink beer, and record it. This has been another pour from the PT Pintcast. The PT Pintcast is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. More on the show at ptpintcast.com.
The show today is brought to you by the Brooks Institute of Higher Learning, an innovator in providing advanced post-professional education. The Brooks IHL offers 7 on-site PT residencies, including orthopedics, women's health, geriatrics, pediatrics, sports, and neurology, as well as a neurologic OT fellowship, a competitive OMPT fellowship, and a speech therapy clinical fellowship. Therapists that complete a residency or fellowship through the Brooks IHL will markedly advance their knowledge and skills in a specialty area of practice. Learn more about how a residency or fellowship can help you advance your professional development at brooksihl.org.
Our home on the internet. PTPintcast.com. Created by Build PT. Build PT provides marketing services specifically for private practice PTs.
From website development and hosting,
Providing content marketing solutions
for PT clinics across the country.
See what Build PT can do for you today
At buildpt.com.